Okay, so welcome to our session this evening on Midweek Matters, what I've learnt about. And we are very lucky to have Claire Bell joining us tonight. Claire's going to talk about her career, the different roles that she's done and what she's learnt and gained through them. Also, what it's like to look at the challenges with cerebral palsy present in relation to the work in the workspace and how she manages that and what support's available and how she accesses and liaises with that support. And lastly, acknowledging the importance of work-life balance, especially as a parent of a young child. So it gives me great pleasure to invite Claire to join us for Midweek Matters. Good evening.
Oh, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a real honour to sort of be able to talk about my experiences, throughout my career. Might be useful just to give you a bit of background. I grew up in a former mining community on the border between South and West Yorkshire. So I attended mainstream school in the late 80s and 90s, and I went to Lancaster University following that, where I graduated with an honours degree in political sociology. So up until that point, I'd never worked. I'd done some volunteer work, but I'd never actually been in sort of paid work. And I was quite daunted leaving university and thinking, now I've got to find a job. And how am I going to find a job that'll sort of accommodate my needs in terms of any reasonable adjustments? Because at that point, I didn't know what reasonable adjustments I would need. So my first job was totally by fluke, really. I'd come home from university and I have a younger brother who's also disabled. And he'd been to the job centre with my parents to speak to the disability employment advisor, which I checked and they are still there in the job centre. And so my dad says, oh, I've booked you an appointment to speak to this advisor about, how you can look at getting into work. And it just went from there. They were like looking for recruits for a new scheme run by the job centre. Well, it was funded by the job centre and run by our local council at the time. And it was a project that was going on all over the country, and it was focused on helping disabled people to find work, but also then supporting them whilst they were in work with any sort of reasonable adjustments or any conversations with managers. So I started as a participant on that scheme in an admin role. And that was my first foray into work. And I think for me, it was a very sort of secure environment, a very comfortable environment, because I was working with people who predominantly worked supporting disabled people. So I felt more comfortable at finding my feet and trying to work out what support that I would need in that sort of environment. So that was really sort of a really good starting point for me. And then I actually carried on working on that scheme. My next job was actually as a support worker on that scheme, going out and doing support reviews with people, helping them find jobs, having those conversations with managers around reasonable adjustments. And that included working with external companies as well. And what I really found from that right at the start was that a lot of companies want to support disabled people in work, but don't know how they would do that. So having that sort of mediation type role and that advice and support on hand was key, and it helped a lot of people flourish in careers in the private sector as well as within the public sector that we were working.
I thought that was right.
That's amazing. But yeah, and just going back before we progress into where you went from there, when you moved out of the admin role, or even while you were in that, and then you were in the support worker, because this was a system that was helping people with disabilities progress in their career and their environment. Did you have a support worker for your job out of interest?
Yes, so like the manager, because I worked with the manager of the scheme, so she acted, and at that point it was quite small, so it was just me and her, so she did all the support meetings, so she was my support worker, and which was great because I had so many opportunities for training that I might not necessarily have had, and we were based within the Equality and Diversity Department in HR, so we had we had those fingers in a lot of pies, and we were involved in a lot of things, so I got to see a lot of the wider organisation, so I was really fortunate, and that's what helped me sort of progress to the next bit.
So once you progressed from support worker at work step, what was your next maneuver?
Right. So at that point, I was realizing that I was really enjoying the sort of one-to-one interaction with people and going out and actually, providing support to people. So my next job was the start of my career in social housing. So I joined a pilot scheme at the social housing landlord that I worked for. And it was a pilot scheme to help reduce health inequalities in the district, because we're obviously the majority of the district is ex-mining, industrial. There's a lot of health inequalities in the area. So it was a big push on that. So I joined that scheme as, again, a support worker, but specifically supporting tenants to help improve their health and well-being. So it was going out and sort of visiting vulnerable tenants, people who've been highlighted by other teams within the housing association, and then going out helping, doing support plans with them, and then referring them on for support to other agencies and monitoring. And it was all around. Obviously, the most important thing for people's health and well-being is having a safe and secure home, because without that foundation, people cannot, improve their health and well-being. So this project was funded by what was then the Primary Care Trust. And so there was a lot of sort of key relationships with other local organisations. And so that was like our first foray into that sort of multi-agency support with the NHS. And that I'm no longer working on that scheme now, but that has grown and grown because the benefits of it have been so evident. The team became like permanent employees of the housing association, and then it's grown further to include what we call mental health navigators, which are mental health nurses or social workers, or mental health nurses or social workers that are actually seconded to work within our housing to try and sort of fast track some of the most vulnerable people who need support with mental health, because obviously the whole nature of social housing is that we are gonna have some of the most vulnerable people who live in the district living in our properties. So it's just grown and grown from sort of things like that, and it's really, really worthwhile. And although I don't work directly on that project now, I'm still in my current role, still very much involved, which I find really rewarding.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So how long were you doing the social housing for?
So I started in that role in 2009.
Mm.
And I did that until I think it was around 2000, end of 2013, And this sort of ties in with sort of getting towards, yeah, so I was 30, so I was starting to notice a decline in sort of like my mobility and becoming more and more tired. And because this job was predominantly visiting and I was out driving around, going in and out of people's properties, I got to that point where I thought, I can't carry on doing this sort of job. I mean, at that point, I'd not got Dotty, but I think, as I'd mentioned previously, I've got two adult stepchildren, and they were in their teens at that time. So I was still there quite a lot at home, supporting them, and it was just getting too much, the sort of physical aspects of the job. So then I had to seriously think about what I wanted to do next.
Can I, as a mum as well, can I just pause you there? Because you weren't just working outside of the house, you were then coming home and doing your other job.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes we don't, whether we work outside of the house or not, we don't remind ourselves about the amount of energy it takes to obviously not only maintain ourselves physically, with our personal stuff, but also, the daily activities like the washing, the cooking, the cleaning, all of that, the planning, the socializing. So you actually try and keep that work-life balance, or that balanced life, so that you continue enjoying what you do. It takes energy.
It does.
It takes a lot of energy. So I just wanted to, someone once said to me, you come home from your job and you start your second job. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to
It is very much like that, isn't it? But yeah, so I'd just gotten to that point, and I felt I wasn't happy about it. I felt like I was giving up a little bit, but I was just totally overwhelmed by sort of how tired I was becoming and how much more difficult I was finding things. And at this point, obviously, this is like just over 10 years ago, and I'd not even considered that it was due to any sort of decline with my cerebral palsy, because as far as I knew at that point, there was no change to the cerebral palsy past 18. You know, obviously, and you speak to doctors and they're like trying to sort of put it down to hormones, or and just generally sort of anything and anything they could come up with, but no one sort of really like sort of understood about how cerebral palsy does change as you get older and the effects that it has on you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we can all appreciate, empathize with you in the room. Brian just put in the chat, he understands it's had to reduce his hours in his job. So yeah.
Yeah.
But what was your next move after
Right.
that?
So
What was your choice as to, what way? Because obviously you stayed in employment, but
yeah.
considerations and things.
So again, like obviously having like a really good manager at the time, I'd like sort of it were like I'd like sort of changed managers quite recently, just because the project had changed managers, and the old manager probably wasn't as used to supporting someone with any sort of additional needs, and didn't know how to approach. How I was coming and saying, right, I'm starting to find this difficult, and I was going and saying, is there any way that I can be more office based and maybe help the other team members by doing like some of the more easier referrals over the phone, where you've just got to refer on to other agencies. And she was quite new into that role at that time, and she probably didn't have the sort of experience to be able to sort of say, encourage me and be like, yeah. She was just like, oh no, I don't think we can do that. And then I took a bit of time. I took a couple of weeks off because I was exhausted. And then when just as I came back, the manager had changed, and so obviously I went back to have my sort of back to work meeting, and she was asking me about, why I'd been off and things. And she was like, oh, well, there's loads you can be doing within the office. We need to create a whole new sort of procedure, policies. And obviously, because you've done the job role, you'll be able to help with that. So I sort of led on that, and sort of helped with sort of the like sort of less complex referrals that could be done over the phone. And so I did that for a few months. And then but I was obviously looking for something else, because I knew this couldn't be a long-term sort of thing, even though they were being really supportive. So then I saw a part-time 18.5 hours job with in a different team in the organisation, and that was specifically managing a grant that we received from the council to support tenants in independent living. So it was a total change, and it was very much office based, very much like senior admin, dealing with some finance, a lot of problem solving, checking claims, but I really enjoyed it. So I did that. Luckily for me, I'd started that role just before I got pregnant. So it was quite good timing, because I knew that it were a role that hopefully I would be able to go back into after having Dottie. I mean, that was another daunting time, because again, trying to sort of find people with similar experiences, people with CP who'd had children, and there was just, at that point, there was nothing on the internet. All I could find was things around people who had children with CP. There was nothing about adults having children. And it was scary. It was really daunting. I was like, I had no idea of how it had affected me. I'd had the only one experience I'd had was from doing volunteer work when I was younger. And I'd met a lady who got CP, and she'd had children, and she'd gone from being able to walk to not being able to walk, due to pregnancy. And it did put me off for quite a while, trying to have a baby, because I thought, well, I've got no other experiences. And then her experiences with the NHS as well were not great. Like she'd go to like hospital appointments about a pregnancy, and the doctors would assume that her husband were a friend or a brother. And and they were trying, she says she had the baby in the hospital, and then social services were phoned, to see because they were asking her whether she wanted, she couldn't possibly look after this baby, and would she want to put it up for adoption?
Are you serious?
Yeah, no, yeah, I am. Yeah, deadly serious. So these experiences that I had at like 22, 23, so I had a massive impact on sort of my thinking around having children. It took a long time, because and this,
Wow.
this is only like the early 2000s when this
That's
happened.
why I was wondering. I mean,
Yeah.
I
Oh, yeah.
understand if that was, 40 years ago, but wow, I'm so sorry for you and that young lady.
Yeah, that's it. So I think because I'd had, those conversations early on, it just came, I was replaying this continuously when I was pregnant, thinking, I don't know how it's going to affect me. No one can give me advice. I mean, obviously now there's like Facebook groups specifically for, parents who have CP and things. And like, I'm always really active in those, because I think that's what I want. I just wanted that when,
Yeah.
when I was pregnant and when Dottie was little,
Yeah.
just so you could ask those daft questions, as well as how did you manage this, or how did you do this, and it's things like that are just amazing. And, that's where, like, for me, social media is so good, because it sort of brings a community like ours together.
Mhm.
and it
Absolutely.
makes you,
Absolutely.
it stops you from feeling so isolated and alone,
Mm.
because obviously it can feel like that when you don't know anyone else with a similar condition. So, but yeah, so that sort of shared experiences is like, I think, I'm sure everyone else would probably agree. It's just, it helps so much, just having someone else who can understand even a little bit, because obviously everybody's cerebral palsy affects them slightly differently, but it's just, that common acknowledgement of like, yeah. And then the funny stories as well of like the common things that everyone experiences, and things like the startle reflex and stuff that always like makes everyone laugh. um but yeah, so yeah, that job was a good move for me at that time. And I did that for a few years. Well, I did that up until changing jobs, I think, mid 2020, middle of COVID. Um, and that was because that project that I was working on at that time had sort of folded. So, and I could see that's what was going to happen, that the council were going to cut the funding for it. So I'd done a bit of prep beforehand and started doing other things that I could clearly see that the team needed. Like there was no one dedicated to sort of performance management in the team I was working. So I slowly sort of started taking more and more of that up, which then led to them creating a specific business planning officer role within our team. Most of the teams had already got them, but we didn't. And I could clearly see that there were a need for it. So I sort of pushed, and pushed like, yeah, I can do this, I can do that. And obviously just creating a need. The only issue was that I ended up with the rest of the teams within our area, like doing their reporting as well. So, but yeah, so that's where I am now. I've been here since 2020, and I'm just building on that, and just taking every opportunity as I can.
And um, so you got pregnant in this job,
Yeah,
and you had your daughter Dottie in this job.
yeah,
How was from a point of view of adjusting the management support as you adjusted through the pregnancy, and then when you came back,
yeah,
how was that
yeah.
as you were
So
pregnant with CP?
so that obviously that was a challenge in itself. Although one that it wasn't as difficult as I thought it was going to be, but I felt it could have been handled better. I think everyone was like quite, like management were quite anxious of getting things right, and so I so like things like they sent me to occupational health a couple of times when they really, the occupational health doctor says there was no need to like send you again. They know what to do, but I think they were just obviously it was it's a situation that they'd not had before at that organization. So I think, yeah, so there was some unnecessary visits to occupational health when I asked to, because in my pregnancy, stupidly enough, I took on a few extra hours because my job share partner was off on maternity leave. And so I took on a few extra hours with the intention of building up a bit extra money for maternity leave, which helped. But then as like my pregnancy progressed, I realized I couldn't sort of carry on with that and went back down to my usual 18 and a half hours. And that's when they sent me back to occupational health again for an assessment. And that's when the doctor was like, there was no need to send you, to just put you back to your normal hours. It was like just an average request. I don't think they would have sent someone who didn't have a disability through
So
for.
let me ask you, with your experience in with WorkStep right at the beginning, where you were supporting other people with disabilities into the workspace and helping that navigation between the management and the employee, do you how and obviously what you're saying, if I is that the managers at the place where you were when you were pregnant didn't really have that experience.
Yeah,
What would have, because we talked about problems and solutions, and we know
yeah,
that the disability community is very good at problem solving because that's how, we've all grown up.
yeah.
Um, and what would you, in hindsight, have thought might have been helpful to support your managers, support you better?
Yeah, I think maybe HR looking at some like maybe sort of case studies of like similar situations. I know obviously that there wasn't another example within our company, but obviously surely there'll be other case study examples out there, and maybe just like listening to me more as like the expert of my own condition. Um, but I think when it comes to things like pregnancy, there's so many procedures that need to be followed and checked, and so I think, yeah, so I think it'd be more, just being maybe guided a little bit more by me, and like, yeah, this is what I think could work, and just, yeah, just being more firm on that really, and sort of maybe them going away and doing a little bit of research to like sort of try and find other examples. So, but yeah, I mean, that's one of the only times that I've ever, I mean, they did, they didn't let me down or anything, but I just thought, oh no, maybe this could have been handled slightly
Mm.
better, you know.
And
Um, but yeah, coming back from work, I took it, I was fortunate enough to be able to take a full year, which was good. Didn't want to come back initially. Found it just a struggle going back to work, if I'm honest. I'd waited, like, Dottie were an IVF baby, and we'd waited a long time to have her, and I felt guilty that I was like then going back and doing something for me, because that's what it was, I mean, me and my husband had discussed that we could have, managed financially if I'd stayed off. It wouldn't have been easy, but we would have managed. But like my husband said at the time, you need to go back to work for you, because it's that space that's yours, and you still need to maintain that. And that's what I found difficult. And I would imagine most mums probably feel like that at that point of going back to work, that you've sort of, created this like child, and, spent all year with them, and then, oh no, I'm just gonna up and try and get on with, sort of my own life. And I don't know if it was just pure adrenaline, but then first couple of years being back at work flew quite well. I didn't really have any struggles. Dottie she was in nursery a couple of days a week, spent a day with my mum and dad. So all that was sort of covered. There were no sort of issues, struggles with that. And it weren't until sort of like coming up to starting school, so around 2020, when I was starting to really sort of feel the like extreme tiredness, and really notice like sort of physical changes as well, in terms of falling more and things like that, which was starting to worry me. So, I had all these things on my mind, and I was going into work every day. And then luckily for me, COVID hit, which actually work-wise was a massive step forward for me. Obviously, the time wasn't great, being stuck, at home, and all the worries, about being vulnerable and having family members who were really vulnerable. But the actual working from home, that was like really key, because up until that point, I'd been able to work from home very ad hocly. There wouldn't agreed to me working from home a day a week. It had to be sort of as and when. They just wouldn't, there wasn't the policies there at that point. Then COVID came about and it just showed how easy it was for people to work from home. And so, in one way, COVID was a really positive time for me. And since then, I predominantly work from home. I do most of my job from home. I'll go in once or twice a week, maybe once. At the moment, I've got a new member of staff, so I'm in twice a week. But I would just like go in for meetings and I do my work at home. And that works really well for me because I'm working with a lot of stats and reporting. I find it really difficult to work in an office now. I just can't, the noise. I feel really antisocial. I'm like, I'm just going to go, I need to go home. I can't get this done here. But yeah, so COVID was really positive for me. And I actually had a tough year last year and was off work again. Just trying to come to terms with this extreme tiredness, falling, and how it was impacting me. And then from then I came back and my managers have been really, really supportive. It's like, oh, if you need to change how you do your hours, if you need to spread them out more, if you need to compress them. So yeah, they're being like really proactive because say the job that I do, I don't need to be in the office. People can get me by Teams all the time. I don't do any face-to-face customer contact, so I don't need to be in an office. I can be at home. So it's been really, really good.
So do you think that the change in perspective from the managers was partly due to the lessons of COVID? Maybe partly due to their own, I don't want to put words in your mouth, I suppose.
Yeah.
I'm just questioning because it seems very different from when you
Yeah.
were pregnant.
Yes. Yeah, that were it. Well, I think because home working was relatively new in our organisation when I was pregnant, there were certain roles that had like home working, but it was all very official and party contract and whereas obviously now we're all working flexibly and everything changed. I think yeah, a lot of that is as a result of COVID. And I mean, obviously we were like social housing landlord, and the area that I sort of work in supports the most vulnerable tenants. And obviously we look after the independent living schemes as well. So our job didn't stop all the way through COVID. It just carried on. We had staff who were out at schemes, all as normal jobs had to be done. And just everything increased with the amount of reporting and things that needed to be done. So we just carried on working. So it just really showed that, yeah, no, people can work from home. It doesn't make a difference. We worked as efficient, well, more efficiently probably. I do. I work far more efficiently at home than I do in office. I get too distracted by conversations and just general office noise. But yeah, I think COVID had a massive impact. And obviously that's when working flexibly became standard, and like now a lot of people work condensed hours, which were not really a thing then, so a lot of people do 5 days over 4. And like all our jobs now at the housing association I work for are advertised as up to 37 hours a week. So there's already that awareness that there's that opportunity for negotiation on the amount of hours you do. So they are really trying now. And obviously we went a period of time without any inclusion sort of representative in the organisation or key. Obviously we're always partner of a role, but we have got an inclusion business partner again now. And that role's been there over the last sort of, yeah, it would similar sort of time to COVID, maybe just before COVID. So I think that's had an impact as well, that we've got someone whose like role is to try and push all these different sort of flexible working agendas and supporting like the different communities. But it's also very focused on getting employees involved rather than it just being driven by the business partner. There's a lot of like employee resource groups and putting on, them getting involved in putting on like awareness sessions, fun activity days, and just raising more of an awareness of people, people's differences, really.
So can I ask you, when we did our month looking at employment issues, one of the things that came up in discussion for the community was, do you declare your disability, and when do you declare your disability? And so I'm just wondering, have you, first of all, have you always shared your diagnosis with people, and how that impacts you and what the needs are? And the second thing, I suppose, is within your working environment over the decades, have you found there's been a change in how open people are about whether they've got a physical, visible disability or a hidden disability? Or do you feel still the stigma is just as much as it has been all along?
Uh, I think I've always declared my disability. Obviously, I started off a disability employment scheme, so I think it was just always there. And I think sometimes I probably, as my career moved on, earlier on, I declared it as maybe in a lack of confidence way, really, because I always thought I've got to put something out there in case I'm not as good as other people, and that was a big thing for me in my younger years, just not feeling good enough, and always trying to sort of be as good as everyone else. That was, a big thing, and that always, and I know it has done. It's like a lot of people, a lot of times that's come across as people thinking I'm arrogant or thinking I'm better than other people, or I've got to be the best. It's not. Whereas in my mind, I'm just like trying to work just to get to that sort of level. So, yeah, I've always declared mine. Yeah, I did, and I've had like loads of worries over whether, when I declared it initially, whether that were going to put people off. I went for one interview once and was totally blindsided because the first question in the interview was, tell me how your disability affects you in work. And coming from the background that I did, I knew that should never be asked at an interview, but it just blindsided me that much that it just threw me off the rest of the interview. I could barely remember my name.
Mm.
I mean, that was an experience, anything like that, like since. And I think some people are still sort of reluctant to sort of declare the disability because they think it might change the way that people think about them. And I've had conversations with people about this before, and yeah, it's like, no, they might use it as an excuse to get rid of me. I might say that I can't do my job properly. I've had this in the past. I think it is definitely changing, and I think it's like also an age thing as well. I think like the younger people I've met, like through sort of work, who are disabled, are more open to sharing like their disability and like owning it as part of them. Whereas I think it's like, but like I know for like sort of me and like sort of probably people older, there's always been this sort of thought around your disability being something that you need to overcome, and I think attitudes are starting to change a little bit now, which is really positive. But yeah, so I think it is changing. It's nowhere near as bad as what it was, but I think people who have been in work a long time and have never declared it are still reluctant now, because it's like, well, if I just declare it now. But but yeah, it's definitely changing, and there's a lot more sort of awareness, I think, now, about disability. And like it's only been really recently, like at work, we've been doing a massive push on like new lanyards, and there was like a lot of like sort of different ones that people were sort of picking up, and we had some ones for pride, and sort of being a like a supporter of that community. And then like obviously they brought the sunflower young lads in for like people who had hidden disabilities or disabilities. And I thought, for the first time in my life, I felt comfortable saying, right, I want one of them, and I'm just gonna, yeah, that's it, that is me. Because I thought, well, if it just helps someone else to, encourages them to come and speak to me, or if they feel like, they've got experiences that they want to share, then yeah, but there's a lot of people who struggle in employment due to disability, who maybe aren't able to, like, have the confidence to like promote themselves and, you know discuss the difficulties that they're finding in employment. Whereas I thought, if I can sort of just be that sort of person, and show, yeah, it's all right to declare disability at work, just own it. It's not something you have to overcome anymore. It's part of you. It's not going to go away. And so I think it's been really refreshing, like these last couple of years of learning so much about how, like, the effects of CP change as you get older. And that's made a massive difference to me. And, that sort of feeling of, because before that, it was just like, oh, am I just becoming depressed all the time? Am I just, is it inevitable that I'm just going to be depressed because, the condition's getting on top of me? But I've just gone to a point where I'm just constantly like, going to doctors and being like, oh, this, I'm struggling with this, I'm struggling with that, and not getting the support. But then again, I managed to find, there was a nurse practitioner at the doctors that I go to, who's got a sister with CP, and so she was like, she could like relay in terms of like how her sister's like conditions deteriorated as she's got older, whereas any other medical professional I had would just be like, oh well, everyone starts to age from like 40, and it's just part and parcel of aging. But because I remember saying to my consultant once, when he said this to me, and I said, so were you struggling to stop yourself from falling over at 40? And and it's like that sort of idea that you're expected to just get on with it,
Yeah.
and just shut up, and your problems can't be fixed easily.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like swept under the carpet a little bit. But yeah, so it is, it's not good, but you have got to be that proactive fighter, aren't you, all your life? If you've got conditions like this, you've got to fight your own corner, because there isn't anyone else there to do it for you.
So before we move on to the juggling the work-life balance, what advice? I know you said quite a lot, which has been amazing, but do you have a few sort of top thoughts around those people, not necessarily, the older generation that grew up with the stigma of the whole thing, but anyone who hasn't quite declared it, and what advice you might give to them as to how they can navigate that workspace and in authentically.
Yeah. So I think the first thing I would do is to actually go searching for the HR policies and look what your organisation has in place, because there might be a plethora of things already in place to support people. So that would be the first thing I would do, and then I would speak to someone who you felt confident in speaking to, such as your line manager or someone else, you know, who you work with in a more senior position who might be able to sort of give you some advice. And then ultimately, you can always just go to your HR rep without speaking to your manager if you don't feel comfortable in doing that. But I would say, yeah, just seek out what's going on in your organisation and what, you know, what there is out there. And then also, if there's something specific that you know could help you in the workplace, go to them with that as a solution. If you know, I always find like managers tend to be far more responsive if you go with a problem, whatever it is, and go, these are the possible solutions, because then there's something to work with. It's not going and saying, I've got this problem. If you go with the solutions already there, then you've solved the problem for them. They just have to look at what's the most like appropriate solution. So yeah, that'd be, yeah, maintain the solution focused attitude that most of us have.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you. I'm going to go through the comments in a minute because
Yeah,
we've got some brilliant comments. But can we just move on to the penultimate sort of area that I wanted to explore with you, which was how you the whole work-life balance thing, because I know that's something that you wanted to share.
yeah. Yeah, if anyone wants to give me any advice on doing that effectively. Yeah, so I think it's really important to sort of have the boundaries in terms of work, which is difficult when you're working from home because it's so easy just to think, oh, I could just log on and do that on Saturday morning while it's quiet. But I think it's really important to have those boundaries so that you've got family time, but also when you've got a condition such as CP, you have to ensure that you've got time to rest, you know, because that's as key as anything else. So you need your time to rest. So it's about building that in. Most of the time, I don't do it totally effectively, but it seems to be the me time that falls down. You end up like sort of obviously working as hard as you can, then trying to sort of have all your sort of family commitments, and it's that bit in the middle where if you don't look after yourself and don't do things that help you maintain your condition, then you can't be everything to everyone. So clear boundaries is good. I would definitely like say that's really important, and having things socially that's important to you as well. Like I'm really sort of heavily involved in our parish church, so I do a lot of that. I mean, I do quite a bit of volunteer work there as well, which you know can encroach on that time, but it also gives me that like sort of time to socialize with people as well and my friends, and just that space as well. I mean, like that like hour on a Sunday morning in church just is my perfect quiet time where I don't have to think about anything else. I'm just totally focused in that moment and getting myself ready for the week ahead. So it's really important to have those little like things that is key to you, whether that's like doing, you know, a bit of meditation, a bit of yoga, going to gym. It's having those little things where you can just totally be you and just totally switch off. And
Amazing.
lots of afternoon naps as and when can be fitted in. That's really key.
I think that's really wise guidance that we'll play back to you at some point as when you need
Yeah,
it.
maybe I should just have that bit on repeat when it gets to Friday, like 5 o'clock. Just replay that bit.
So before we go to the comments and questions, because I know there are some, I wanted to just move on to the last area, which was how we met. Because Claire approached us to say she'd really like to put on a tea in her church to a fundraising tea for UP. And I just thought it would be a really lovely opportunity, Claire, for you to sort of share with us, what made you think about doing it, how you found us, what was the experience like, were there any surprises when you were doing it, any, comments? So I'll
Yeah.
over to you.
So, like as I said, like last year, I was having not a good year, and so I started on sort of process of counselling with Disability Plus, and which has I've had counselling many times in the past, but this was the only time that seemed to click, and it seemed to help me sort of accept my disability finally. I thought I must have accepted it years ago, but through the counselling I realised no, I'd not really accepted it, that it was part of my life and that it was having this impact that it was. It'd always been something like I just needed to brush under the carpet and, overcome. So through this, I thought, no, I want to sort of get involved more in, in the CP community and like do things to help. And obviously because I'd got a politics background from obviously being younger and always working government sector, I was like really drawn to what Up were doing, and I'm like, yeah, because this is it. At the end of the day, we need fundamental change, and we can't do that without getting, like policies changed, and like lobbying government. So I thought this is a really, good initiative. So yes, I contacted Emma and I was like, just told her a little bit about my experiences and just said that I really wanted to do something like an afternoon tea because to help raise some money. So it just went from there really. And what I couldn't believe was like before the event and when I sort of started advertising it, the amount of like donations I got before the event, I just could not, like, it just blew me away. I think I was at about £400 even before like the actual event. And it was like a lot of people that I knew who didn't realise that I'd got cerebral palsy or didn't realise the impact that it had on my life. And so it seemed to strike a chord with a lot of people, especially because I talked a lot about how scared I was in pregnancy and like all the effects, with the postnatal depression and things like that. So it really struck a chord with a lot of people, and so the like donations started flooding in, and then I was like really anxious on thinking about the actual days anyone going to come. I knew there were like obviously certain family members come, but then like some like friends from work who lived like 8-9 miles away just bobbed in, and it was like it was just a really nice day. It was very children focused. They had a lot of activities on for kids, who like were just put on by friends who said, right, I'll come and do some face painting. One of our friends like came and did some dancing. She's a dance teacher. So it was just a really lovely afternoon. And then from that, but there was like a family came that day, with none of us had met them before, and they'd literally their friend had like guided them to us the post on Facebook, and they got a little girl who'd just been diagnosed with cerebral palsy, and they just didn't know anyone else locally who had anything to do with cerebral palsy, who knew anyone with cerebral palsy. So they'd just come for just a chat really, and it was really good because I mean obviously I could like talk to them about my experiences like growing up and things, but then my mum had a really good chat to him about obviously her experiences like parenting someone with like CP, and she exchanged numbers with him and everything. So that was really positive, and it just made it seem really worthwhile. And it was just such a lovely sort of family day, and like most of my family were involved. And it was just really positive all around. It was quite overwhelming, the amount of support that we sort of had. And I shared it, and I felt confident as well to like share the article I'd wrote with work and had it on our employee page. And then as a result of that, someone contacted me at work who had CP, who'd never disclosed it at work, never felt confident talking about it, never really accepted a disability, was really struggling with it at this point, struggling with the way she was feeling. So, and it turned out when we met up, we had loads in common. We were a similar age, been to the same uni, so we've actually sort of formed quite a strong like friendship now. And she's like started on a sort of journey with counselling and sort of working through her feelings around her CP. So there's like just been loads of little things like that. Whereas I thought it must have like been, you know, something I was meant to do, even if it's just had that little impact for just those couple of people, you know. And it's done so much for me. I mean, I'm a totally different person to what I was 12 months ago in terms of my confidence around my disability and being open about it. I mean, I would not have been able to do this 12 months ago. You know, no matter how many presentations I do at work continuously, I would never have, like a year ago, had the confidence to just come and talk about my experiences and how my CP affects me. So yeah, so it's been an amazing year for me since I sort of got involved with up and counselling with Disability Plus, and it's just hopefully going to lead on to more things. And so
Amazing.
yeah, thank you.
Claire, thank you so much for sharing your journey, your experiences, for being the insights that you've learned, and obviously your vulnerability. Being sharing that with us as well, because I think, like everyone, everyone's on a journey of different things. I really appreciate. We all really appreciate it. So thank you so much.